and welcome to Hevsel Weekly. In this episode, Trump's statements on closing the education department, a dramatic plane crash in Toronto, and Pope Francis's complex clinical situation will be discussed. Stay tuned. Let's start with US President Donald Trump considering an executive order that would shut down the US Department of Education, accusing the agency of indoctrinating young people with inappropriate racial, sexual, and political material. Trump expressed his intentions to close the department despite the acknowledgement that this could disrupt billions in aid to K-12 schools and college students. Trump was previously praised to task Linda McMahon, his nominee for Education Secretary, with shutting down the department. However, the Senate has yet to schedule her confirmation. Trump's announcements and accusation of the agency caused some misconception and confusion about what the Education Department transacts. Firstly, a common misconception is that the US schools and curriculum are operated not by the local districts, but by the Department of Education. Instead, the Department of Education, established in 1979, oversees public school funding, manages student loans, runs programs helping low-income students, and contributes to funding programs for supporting disabled students. Additionally, the department enforces civil rights laws designed to prevent discrimination based on race or gender in federally funded schools. But why do Republicans want to abolish the agency anyway? Well, Republicans' idea of eliminating the education department dates back to nearly its establishment years, as they have historically opposed the centralization of education policy, believing it ought to be left to individual states and localities. Even in 1980, a year after the agency was established, Ronald Reagan subsidized its abolishment in his presidential campaign. More recently, Republicans have accused the Department of Education of imposing woke political ideology on children with their definition. Conservatives have also argued that other Department of Education functions, such as loan administration, should be handled by the US Treasury Department, and civil rights violations must be considered the domain of the Justice Department. Then, can Trump shut down the department? Sincerely, he cannot make this decision on his own. Trump indeed has planned to abolish some of the department's programs, while others would be relocated to different parts of the government. However, eliminating the department would entirely require an act of Congress. Not only would Trump need congressional approval, but according to the rules, he would also need a supermajority corresponding to 60% of the 100 senators. Since Republicans only have a 53 to 47 majority in the Senate, they would need at least 7 Democrats to vote to abolish the agency, which is in fact highly unlikely. Moving on to our next, a flight from Minneapolis-St. Paul to Pearson Airport in Toronto crashed and flipped over on February 17th. Fortunately, the number of casualties was 0. The incident took place shortly after 2 p.m. local time on Monday. The Delta Airlines aircraft arrived at Toronto from the U.S. city of Minneapolis and was carrying 76 passengers and 4 crew members. The people on board were hanging upside down in their seats and had to throw themselves onto the cabin ceiling before they could leave the upturned plane. 21 injured passengers were reported to be initially transported to local hospitals, and 19 were later released on Tuesday by Delta. Each crash victim was also stated to be paid $30,000 as an apology. The cause of the crash and why it flipped are yet unknown, but there are some speculations. They noted that the plane appeared to touch down one wheel first during landing, which may have caused the landing gear to collapse upon impact. This may have caused the right wing to hit the runway, causing the plane to roll. Another possible factor is that the pilots attempted a crab maneuver, involving turning the plane into the wind and then directly onto the runway at the last moment. This is the 4th major air crash in North America in less than a month. All 67 people on board died after two aircrafts collided in midair near Washington, D.C., a medical plane crash in Philadelphia left 7 dead, and a small plane crash in Alaska took 10 lives. Despite these incidents, experts say air travel remains increasingly safe. Lastly, Pope Francis has been treated for a complex clinical situation and will remain in the hospital for as long as necessary. The 88-year-old Pope was admitted to Rome's Gemelli Hospital on Friday for bronchitis treatment and tests. The Vatican said on Monday that the Pope had a polymicrobial infection in his respiratory tract, which required changes to his treatment. A later update said the Pope was continuing with the prescribed treatment and was in stable condition with no fever. The Pope had been suffering from bronchitis symptoms for several days before his admission last week and had assigned officials to read prepared speeches at events. Vatican spokesman Matteo Bruni also told reporters a brief statement on his condition and said, "All tests conducted to date indicate a complex clinical picture that requires appropriate hospitalization." The statement added that the Pope's weekly general audience, usually held every Wednesday, has been cancelled for this week. The Pope has faced multiple health issues throughout his life, including a lung surgery at 21. He was hospitalized for bronchitis in March 2023 and missed COP28 due to illness. In December 2024, he appeared with a bruise on his chin after a minor fall at St. Peter's while leading a ceremony. More recently, in January, he injured his right arm and had to wear a sling. That concludes this week's news. We discussed interesting topics, from Trump's move to shut down the education department to the Toronto plane crash and recent air disasters, along with Pope Francis's health concerns. It was Hefsel Weekly. Thank you for listening.